To say a few words.
Thank you, Carrie. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have you with us for another edition of our Future of Engineering Roundtable series. Today's focus is on the role private equity is playing in our industry. This is a topic that the Institute Board has been discussing over the past year. We've also had conversations with our Industry Insights team, so we're excited to share this with you. In October, Morrissey Goodale reported a couple of interesting stats related to private equity that I thought I would just share with you before we got started. The first one is from 2016 through this year, 2023, the percentage of US acquisitions made by private equity-backed firms has increased from 12% in 2016 to 39% this year. The second stat is over that same period, the percentage of E&R top 100 firms that are backed by private equity has increased from 4% in 2016 to 22% this year. So obviously an important topic for us to talk about. Our goal today is to have a balanced discussion about the pros and cons, the benefits and challenges, the whys and why nots related to private equity. So to do that, we've brought together 4 industry executives who have experience, opinions, and passion on this topic. And I want you to join me in welcoming our panelists today: Gail Packer, CEO and President of Terracon; Steve Lefton, President and CEO of Kimley Horn; Bob Scare, CEO of Gannett Fleming; and Jay Wolverton, Executive Vice President and Chief Growth Officer for CHA. Thank you all for joining us. We have a great warm-up call on Monday, and I know each of you has a lot to share today. Kevin McMahon, our Senior Research Consultant at the ACAC Research Institute, is going to lead us in this lively discussion, and I'm going to be monitoring the questions and feeding them into the group, so please don't be shy. Send those in the Q&A or the chat. With that, Kevin, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get started.
Thank you, Daphne. We have leaders from 4 very strong firms here, and we thank you for participating. Let's start with Bob Scare from Gannett Fleming. Bob, your firm recently decided to take on a private equity sponsor investor. Can you just share with us the deliberations you went through as to what you perceived to be the advantages and perhaps any disadvantages that you evaluated when you considered the question of should we do this and bring on a private equity investor?
I'd be glad to. Gannett Fleming had quite an interesting journey to arrive at this decision. It wasn't something that we just came right out and said, let's go look at private equity at all. Here we are, a 108-year engineering firm under the same name, employee owned, and very proud of it. We're very strategically oriented with a strong vision, and we had a financial advisor come in to evaluate the value of the firm so we could set our stock price. And the financial advisor saw our strategic plan and vision and did an analysis and said, just all he said was, you guys are doing great. It's gonna be a real challenge for you to achieve that vision. You might want to think about private equity. And all I'll say is a very large board, and it was very uncomfortable. And it took us 6 months of deliberations. We had those that were interested in the money, and those on the risk, and those are no way in heck. And we just decided to hire a financial broker to come in and educate us and teach us, what does this all mean and how does it work? We felt we had the fiduciary responsibility to look at it. And over the course of 12 months, we went through the entire process, and every month we would ask ourselves, are we in or out? We hadn't made the commitment. Up until the last 2 months, we went all in and decided that we wanted to do this, and that private equity was a way that we could achieve our vision quicker. So the biggest thing, Kevin, is that we could achieve our vision quicker that we felt we needed to be at to be successful.
Great, Bob. Thank you for those beginning insights. And Jay, before I turn to our private ownership representatives, I wanted to ask you, your firm up until a couple of years ago was a private firm, and you joined CHA, which had a private equity investor for a number of years. So you obviously had different paths you could have taken with your firm. You decided to join a private equity invested firm. Can you describe to us the pros and cons you perceive to that existed in that decision-making process, and have they been realized that you're now a part of a private equity invested company?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. And just to follow up, just real brief background, I had my own firm for about 30 years. And in 2018, we went to market, decided that we wanted to be part of a very heavily focused, growth-oriented firm. And at the time we went to market, we had a lot of opportunity. We talked to both strategics, we talked to firms that were PE-backed. And when it was all said and done, the decision that we felt the most comfortable with was joining a private equity. And I would say one of the main reasons for that is look, they're in the business to grow and to make money, pure and simple. And they have resources and they have the availability to help us to look at both acquisitional growth as well as organic growth, the resources needed for organic growth. And I think just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Bob said, it kind of jumpstarts the ability. You know, I will tell you from my perspective in our PE sponsor, it's not just about acquisitional growth. You know, the best firms out there are really focusing more so on organic growth first and foremost. That is the most important and what really sets a firm aside. And then if you can just add on top of that acquisitional growth, that really gives you the jump start needed if you really want to grow a firm. So having that backing and the funding for acquisitional growth was something that was very attractive, wanting to be part of a growing firm.
Thanks for those insights, Jay. I'm going to turn to Steve and Gail, who are both leaders of very successful privately owned firms. And we want to get, and obviously they have many, many options historically and in front of them. Steve, we'll start with you. What is your insights into why you're really passionate about maintaining your 100% employee-owned nature?
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with culture. For us, that's sort of core to everything we do is maintaining our culture, which one of the underpinnings is what I describe as being fiercely private. But we're also, some of the things, it's not terribly different than sort of what Jay said. Part of our culture is a lot of what you said was, hey, PE is about growth and making money. So are we. We just want to keep that within our employees, right? We love that. Those are important things for a business, grow and make money. We do that pretty well. We're pretty proud of that. And I think that is really important and we'll talk about that, I think, in some other questions of, you know, maybe why some firms are faced with that we need to do something different. And I want to make the case for you can do this. You can grow, you can make money, you can maintain your culture, and a path is to remain private, right? There are other paths, right? And we'll hear about that with the PE side of things, and of course there's even there's an array. But I want to make sure that people understand we have been wildly successful. Our growth has been extraordinary, sort of top 10% in our industry. We're top 10 in our firm and are fiercely private.
Thank you so much, Steve. Gail, you have a pretty unique ownership model, I'd say. I'd ask you if you could briefly describe that to the audience, and then tell us why you think, you know, your privately held ownership model gives you a competitive advantage going forward.
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. And I might want to pick up on what some of the others have said, that, you know, we're in part of the title of this program is really a fair and balanced approach. And really, there are lots of ways to do what you want to accomplish. We are absolutely unapologetically passionate about employee ownership, and it's the right thing for us. That does not mean it's the right thing for everyone. But I think part of this panel is to explain to people that there are different options available to you. And the earlier you start looking at those options and evaluating what you want to be doing in the future, that will help you. So for us, we have about 6,500 employees. Our company is owned 45% through an ESOP, and about 95% of our people participate in the ESOP. And you can buy stock inside the ESOP February of every year, and you are also granted stock inside the ESOP as part of a 401k match. So that's part of how 95% of our employees are owners. In addition, 55% of the company is owned individually by about 1,200 shareholders. And that is anybody who's been at the company for a year or more is eligible to buy stock outside of the ESOP. And principals of the company are required to take a portion of their bonus in stock every year until they meet certain ownership targets or certain age requirements. So it's a pretty broad-based employee ownership structure. We think that works really well for us. We believe a lot in it drives our performance, and we have all of our employees that feel like they've got skin in the game. They have a voice in the company. They have the ability to help shape our future. But we are unapologetic about the foundation of all of that is safe, prosperous, which by which we mean profitable growth. And we are about growth. And it requires us, if we want to stay employee owned, to be disciplined around our financial performance and around our culture and what that means for all of our people. So it's a very intentional directive. I have the pleasure right now of sitting through some presentations from our emerging leaders. And, this comes up in their presentations about why it's important that we take this on for the future, because we own this company and we want to be the owners of this company 15, 20 years from now when we're in the driver's seat. So it's very much driven throughout our culture.
Great, Gail. Thanks for those insights. And I've already found that all four of you agree on the word prosperous. So that's a very good platform to build on. Jay, let me ask you, you stepped into a private equity situation having run your privately held business for 30 years. So you had a certain mindset about organic growth and probably your own guardrails in that, long journey with your own situation. How did you find that your mindset changed by joining a privately held firm as you look at helping to grow this much bigger enterprise?
Kevin, I'm not sure if I would say that it changed. I would say that it got energized. We were a smaller firm, a little over 100 people at the time that we went to market, which was, 7-8 years ago. Okay, so we had some growth initiatives, but it's a little bit tougher for a firm of that size to take on some big bold moves, whether it's strategic hires or even look at acquisition and stuff yourself. So just having resources was something that was huge. The other thing, just expanding upon that just a little bit, we went to market 8 years ago, and I was in my early 50s at that time. Before we even went to market, we had a very strong leadership team in place that was helping us grow, and we were very steady, not moonshots or anything along those lines. And we actually went to that group first and had discussions with them about the opportunity to take on ownership roles. And I think something that this panel will expand upon is there's a very different set of leadership skills, but set of skills between leadership and ownership. And you need to make sure that you are concentrating on both, because you do need both. We went through that process for a couple of years, and when it was all said and done, those leaders were great leaders, don't get me wrong, and they really helped the firm, decided that ownership was not for them. And so that was one of the things that led us to go to market and, again, look at both strategics, the Kimley Horns and the Terracons out there, as well as the private equity firms. So we just ended up private equity was the best fit for us.
Terrific. Thanks, Jay. Bob, I want to ask you, you're early in your journey with private equity and you're still, learning new things, but you've I know, experienced some positive things on the growth side from just your early involvement with private equity. Can you describe one or two of those experiences?
Yeah, glad to, Kevin. Probably one of the biggest strengths of private equity for us is having somebody from the outside with a different lens on how we, on our leadership, our processes, and our culture. And it has proven to be quite helpful to us. So they came in and did a thorough analysis, a market study, and in this case, validated our vision, validated our strategic plan. So, it was a check the box on that. They did a thorough analysis of our a leadership team, 360, pretty deep into the firm, and interviewed our employees to understand the culture. They came back with some recommendations that startled us about some mismatches in leadership and roles. And we took their advice, and it made a big difference. They brought in the third consultant to look at processes that we were doing, and found about 4 or 5 things they thought we should improve, and it's really worked for us. The process of generating DSO, lowering our DSO, improving our cash flow has been very successful. Our ability to look at our pipeline and understand what is in our pipeline and tie that into our backlog and resource management has also been very successful. So there's all those little examples that have really helped us have yet another historic great year. So there's a lot of positive there. But I will say, having a private equity firm does add an element of more accountability than we were able to do on our own. And so there's that bottom line focus. Steve's talked about that passion, and Gail, we all have the passion to make money. When you have private equity, it's a notch hotter, I would say. And even if not stated, it's implied that way. And it's a healthy thing, and it's worked very well for us.
Great, Bob. Thanks for that candor too, by the way. I'm sure there's a moment in time where you said, do I need all this accountability? But, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Steve, let me ask you, Bob mentioned some, external inputs that he received that, helped shape his strategic plan in a positive way. Is there anything that you perceive that you're not getting by not having that outside influence and investment in your firm, skin in the game from outsiders?
Sure. I acknowledge this, for those on the call, we had a little bit of prep. I said, look, if I'm going to be really candid kind of about maybe one of our challenges is we're really proud, right? And we're really proud of our leaders and our partners. And that leads us to be somewhat insular. And so, that idea of getting outside voices and outside perspectives is something that we continue to explore. And how do we get people to help us think through, how do we break into different markets, different geographies, things like that. And ultimately what we've said is we do need to do more of that. Our position has been, we don't need that with the financial backing. I mean, I joke, I have PE calls, a half a dozen a week, email or call. And, when I'm feeling frisky, I'll respond and say, yeah, thank you, but you don't have enough money, right? Maybe we'd be interested in you, right? But the idea of getting help, right, of getting outside perspective, I want to decouple that from private equity. There may be a case, and we heard that with Bob, where, yeah, that's the expertise you need. But we've really become fond of hiring subject matter experts, whether that's exploring geographies or, how do we help move our consultancy to be more of a tech-enabled consultancy and leverage the services, and the idea of being trusted advisor with, a suite of technology tools that are going to, be better for our clients and community. So that's how we've looked at it for what it's worth. But I think there's different ways to get that outside expertise. And yeah, PE is one. There's also a lot of great advisors out there that can be subject matter experts for you. That's the route we've gone.
Great, Steve. I'm going to ask Gail a couple questions, and then we'll have Daphne field a question from the audience. Gail, your firm is unique privately because you have an ESOP and a lot of direct shareholders. And so twofold question. One, is there anything from your growth vision that you really are reticent to do because of the ESOP and a lot of direct shareholders? And two, Bob mentioned that he's getting some outside advice from really skilled folks. Do you avail yourself of such advice, and how do you go about doing it?
Sure. So I might get to the second question first, Kevin, and then come back to it. So we absolutely get outside advice, subject matter experts in a lot of different ways, including just sort of hiring it done. I joked on our prep call that PE is not private equity, but some professional engineering license doesn't mean PE is professional everything. So you have to get subject matter experts in other ways to help you really guide and direct your business at scale. It's one thing to be able to say, hey, we're here today, we want to get to here. How do we scale that? That requires some expertise that you need to hire outside your firm. And no matter who you are, you need to get subject matter experts in that space. We also have a board of directors that is made up of 5 internal directors and 4 external directors. And our external directors bring with them 3 of them broad industry experience at the C-suite level of different companies and different spaces within our industry, and a 4th external director who's outside of our industry completely and focused in Silicon Valley and around technology. So we really want to have that sort of governance model that includes external directors as part of our board who are bought into what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and challenging the executive committee of the company in, are you going fast enough? Are you going big enough? How do we continue to get better with this? So that's how we've sort of built in that piece of expertise, guidance. They've been where we have not been yet. They all came from companies who are larger than we are and help us get there from a sort of bought in perspective, although they're not shareholders, they're paid board members. And then that translates into when you've got the ownership structure that we have with an ESOP, and then also with that many external or individual shareholders, we govern the company from a governance perspective, much like a public company would without all the public company requirements. So from a do we have what the structure of the board to the structure of our policies and how our charters and things like that go into play, it's very much governed like you would see at a public company, but without the extra what we'll call bureaucratic dollar signs that come along with that, that we don't think we need to do. So it's really kind of deciding for ourselves what's the level of governance that we need to satisfy our fiduciary responsibility to that many shareholders, but knowing that they're all employees as well. And so how do we combine those 2 things and make the right decision for Terracon? And we do that again with internal and external directors.
Great, thanks so much. Just following up again on the first part, are there any investment decisions or ideas that you want to pursue that you feel you have to hold back because of the nature of your private ownership?
Yeah. No, I don't feel like we have to hold back on anything. As a matter of fact, now we discuss large investments at the board level, obviously. So we have to have a strong business case for it. Have we really thought through and been disciplined around what it is we want to invest in, whether that's acquisitions or technology or investments in technology companies or in other things? We have to think that really, it's not on a whim. It's not something that it feels right, we'll do it. We've done our due diligence on that. And by preparing for a board discussion, a board discussion about that, we feel like we're well prepared, we're making the right decisions for the company, and we're getting a lot of input on what that right decision should be, and then we have to make a decision. But I don't feel like our structure or our capital model prevents us from doing anything that we really want to go do. We're in good shape.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Daphne, we have a number of questions from the audience. Can you?
Yeah, there's 2 in particular, Kevin, that I wanted to bring up. The first one I think is a pretty quick answer, and this is to Bob and Jay. So for those that have the PE backing, have you seen a departure of employees due to culture change?
You want to take it first, or you want me to, Jay?
Sure, I'll be happy to. Listen, there's no doubt there was some changes associated with that, especially in our case. We went from a little over 100-person firm to a firm that was over 1,000, a little bit more regimented as far as processes and procedures and things like that. And we had some folks that made decisions to go elsewhere. For the most part, went back to smaller firms and things like that. With that said, we've continued to grow ever since we did our transition, and we have just finished an exercise at CHA where we've redeveloped our culture. There have been 9 acquisitions over the last 5 years. So think about that. That's 9 different cultures that you have melded and brought together. And we went through a huge exercise and working together last year to determine what is the new CHA, what is that branded look, and how do we work together. And we've seen tremendous success to that. And over the last year and a half, our numbers as far as voluntary turnover have been well below the industry standard because of that effort. So it can go both ways. And you're going to have to concentrate on culture in a private equity firm just exactly like Steve and Gail do within their private firms. I promise you, culture is the #1 issue in all of our firms. No ifs, ands, or buts, no matter what your structure and how you're owned.
Do we
Appreciate
agree
your
on at
time,
least two things?
Say that again.
So we agree on at least two things,
There
right?
you go.
Prosperity and culture.
I have a
I
feeling
think
we're
we-
gonna get to 5, Steve, if we keep going.
All right.
I couldn't agree more with Jay on that. And I think, Steve, we all agree with that. So much of it is about culture. When we stepped into this, we recognized, you know, a 108-year-old firm. How's this going to, you know, how are our employees going to take this? And we developed a very, very strong communication strategy. And I will say, just to set the tone, we had 148 out of 148 of our owners buy into the new firm, and we lost not one person. But that came on the hands of being very transparent on what we were trying to accomplish, how we were going to do it. But the second piece of that is about values. It's about culture, and we're a very family-oriented firm. And it's about picking the right private equity firm that understands your value system and your culture, wants to nurture that, not harm that, because they don't want to destroy what's good, but they want to help you improve what needs to be fixed. So we still maintain a focus of our employees. We still invest in innovation. We've developed an enhanced bonus program, all under the umbrella of private equity. And the result of that is, yes, we lost a few people, not very many, due to the fact that we went private equity. Year to date, we're well below the industry voluntary turnover. So I feel very good about that. But it's true. There were individuals that absolutely left the firm, not many of them, from the sheer fact that we entertained that, but very, very few.
Kevin, I've got one more for the other side of the house, if you will. So for those firms that, you know, in Steve's words, are fiercely private, when a PE opportunity comes before you, is that something that you are sharing with your shareholders? Are they involved? Is there any kind of formalization of that? Or is the decision mainly made at the management or board level?
You want to go first, Gail?
I don't care. I can go first. So we get approached like Steve. We get emails or phone calls about interest in Terracon. We have had multiple discussions at the board of directors level and at the principals level of the company, which is the majority of the individual shareholders, but also with the ESOP trustees, that we believe remaining employee owned and 100% employee owned is part of our culture. It is exactly what we want to do, and we're not interested. So I don't take individual emails or phone calls to anybody because I have the board's decision that we're not interested. So I don't feel the need to do anything with that. But from a fiduciary responsibility, you know, the board has to have that discussion. We have to have that direction. We have to understand why. And part of that also requires us to make sure we understand that we can sustain our model and do what we want to do. And what does that require us to do from a financial performance perspective, and also from an ownership transition perspective? Because, you know, one of the things that oftentimes cripples employee-owned firms is that at some point you have to buy the stock back from the owner when they retire, or depending on what your model looks like. And are you making sure you're accounting for that when you're looking at forward into the future and projecting your own cash flows to do what you want to do, and to have the shareholder buyback liability that's sitting on your balance sheet, which is oftentimes the largest liability for firms of our size? Are you able to sustain that model? We do that work annually to make sure that we know exactly where we are, where we need to be. Do we need to make any adjustments? Do we need to evolve anything that goes into that? But at the same time, then that also allows me to be able to say to people, we're not interested. We know where we are. We know what we want to do, and we're just not interested. So I don't take individual things to anybody.
Great deal. Steve?
Yeah, I'll be brief because I could use different words, but effectively my answer is virtually identical to Gail's. they come in all the time. I have full authority of the board and management to hit delete effectively. But the reason why, that's where I want to spend just a minute, is around this idea of being fiercely private and having what I'll call rigor around ownership transition. So we don't spend our time entertaining those things, because we spend our time focused on ownership transition, on, and you said it, we call them our friendly creditors, right? Our friendly creditors are our former owners, right? And that is part of our ownership transition model, and making sure that we're continuing to drive. So part of our culture, that idea of being fiercely private, is wanting to be an owner, right? And for the next generation to want to be owners, you have to have, in our world, we think it has to be a great firm, has to be a great culture, and it has to be an incredible financial return. So we drive performance of the firm, I think, just like, or even more so, because in our minds, our firm depends, our existence depends on incredible financial return. So we're as interested, frankly, more than PE, because that's what keeps our next work closed loop, right? And if we're going to keep that closed loop, we've got to have the next generation inside our walls really excited about ownership transition. We got to know that we can pay down debt of those that have retired, and that means having a really robust ownership transition. So I've digressed a little bit, but that's why we focus on that, and the rest is just kind of noise. And so we don't talk about that much any more than an affirmation. We want to remain private. Let's put our energy towards that.
Well, thanks, Steve. I think that's the third thing you all agree on, is financial success is the key to ownership transition, whether you are a PE invested model or just 100% privately owned. Without financial success, the model starts falling apart. Let's follow up on that. Start with Bob and Jay on the availability. There's I think a misnomer out there that private equity firms own 100% of companies, and there's no employee opportunities for ownership and advancement. Can you guys address your specific model relative to employee ownership? Bob, you mentioned 148 have come in and are still there, and what the future holds for new up and coming, younger folks to ascribe and get into employee ownership with both of your firms. Bob?
Yeah, I'll be glad to explain that. It's interesting, there was quite an education process from us to our private equity firm to explain to them the importance of our employees getting a piece of the action. And we had a very aggressive conversation on that. I'm pleased to report that, we've essentially maintained a very robust offering of equity, used to be called stock, prior to our private equity. We're maintaining that same kind of approach under a private equity investor. And I'm very pleased about that. And it's, I think it's part of the reason we were able to keep and retain so many leaders across the firm. So we continued to grow that. We've had three sets of offerings, and so I'm very satisfied that we haven't at all been diminished in our ability to bring in new ownership.
Do you have an imbalance in either way, Bob? Like, too much demand, not enough stock, or the reverse, or is it? There's always more demand than supply, and that was when we were private, and it still exists today. So we still have to make strong decisions of who are the leaders that are going to drive our business that we want to give that equity to. So not anybody that wants it gets it. But we've added another, we've added over 50 new equity partners into the firm, for example, in those three offerings that we've put out there. And that's pretty, we're right balanced for the size firm we are. We're a 3,000 person firm. We're right where we should be. And that's where we would have been if we hadn't done this as well. Great insights. Jay, how about you? Did you find that there was enough availability of equity for your key team bringing them into CHA? And is that still the case 5 years later?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the deal structure that our partner does. They're certainly looking at the leadership of the teams that they're bringing on to CHA, and making sure that the stock is pushed down within the organization. That's probably, I would bet, one of the biggest misnomers with private equity is that there's very, very few stockholders within the firm who are actually employees that they want to hold on to that. That has strictly not been our case. And not only within the 5 years that I've been here, we actually had a sit down with our partner and our sponsor, and we said it would really go a long way if we could take stock even deeper. And we developed another plan where essentially that was taking money out of their pockets to continue to reward and push ownership and equity further down into the firm. And that's been received very, very well. I would echo Bob's point. There's probably typically more of a demand than there is availability, but it's something that we're constantly looking at, and how can we reward those that are helping to drive the business? No question.
Okay, great, Jay. Steve, let me ask you, you're running a very successful firm. How was your demand versus the supply of equity? And have you seen any generational change in the attitude towards employee ownership and equity participation by younger engineers over the last 20 years or so?
Yeah. So again, I think, are we on number 4? Item number 4 we agree on. You want to have more demand than supply. The minute you don't, you're in trouble. You don't want to have a massive imbalance. And so we're always looking at, we have a very sophisticated stock model that does regression analysis, looks out, 20 years. And so, that is a very important tool for us to make sure that, we kind of have a sense of when redemptions are going to be, and we can plan for new owners. But we're very focused on driving what we call stock appetite in our firm. And so demand continues to outstrip supply. That doesn't limit, I want to be clear, in our model, which is different than Gale's. We're not an ESOP, we're a C Corp. We've got about 800 owners. You were invited to become an owner, and that's through what we describe as our path to ownership. So once you're an owner, you continue to buy stock throughout your career. So in no ways does it limit our number of owners. What it may limit is the ability to acquire stock. And that's a really important distinction. And one of the things we point out to our young owners is, hey, there's lots of opportunities for you. Now, to your second point, look, there's always generational differences, right? And of course, the current we're always worried whatever the current generation is, they're going to wreck the place, right? We were terrified about millennials. We woke up one day and realized, oh my goodness, 50% of our firm is millennials, and we're having the best year ever. It's going to be okay. So I think there's differences. When you get right down to it, they're not that big, right? This generation wants a lot of things that we want. They want freedom, right? They want to be able to make their choices. They want security, right? And whatever that looks like for them, for us, we say, hey, that's being an owner, right? That provides you security that you are in control of your own destiny, right? And that's sort of our pitch, right? And there's others. But when it comes right down to it, we haven't seen kind of the noise you hear of, oh, people only want to live in the moment. They don't care about 401k. They don't want to be an owner. They're just going to, it's a gig economy. All that noise is out there. But for us, we continue to have just a ton of people oversubscribed in terms of people that want to be part of our model. That doesn't mean that other models aren't successful and they don't flourish. But that's my spiel on generational differences. They're just not that big.
Steve, I was just thinking you may have a lot of PE guys calling you just to have an entertaining conversation. So just look out for that. You have a unique model with a large amount of your owners. I mean, Daphne's got a great question coming up in a second. Large amount of your owners in the ESOP and a large amount of your owners, direct owners. How do you view those two constituencies? They're slightly different, even though they're all employees. And what are the values that you get out of each type of ownership model?
Yeah, so for us, we just call it employee ownership. They're just different vehicles to get there. And part of that is from historically, we've been employee owned, brought the individual ownership since we started almost 60 years ago. We converted the original founder of the company when we bought him out with Jerry Olson in the early 90s. That was where the ESOP started. And the ESOP ownership of the company has grown since the early 90s to where it is today. So it's just organically grown to that size. What we've seen though is, and this will touch on a little bit of the culture, and then also just kind of the question about what does it mean to those employees? No question, when you have employees who are entry level, our field employees entry level, and we're talking to 18-year-old just out of high school employees about a 401k in their future at the company, you get a glassed over look in a lot of cases, and they really don't have anything that they want to add to that, or even acknowledge that it's part of their day-to-day life. They're worried about making sure that they're, going to be able to pay their rent and their bills and go out and have a good time on Friday night. So it is different. So we've done some things to really drive that idea of, hey, look, for all of us, nobody at this company owns more than 2% of the company. Like, it's broadly based. We've put in place tools like a retirement calculator, which gives the employees the ability to say, here's what I make. Here's how many years I think I'm going to work at Terracon. What does ownership mean for me? And so I can put my own numbers in that and see how a little bit a year, with the return on that investment that we intend to happen every year, that's what that means to me in terms of total dollars. So they can see really quickly, okay, this is how it applies to my job and what I do every day. Whether you're an ESOP owner, individual, it doesn't matter. It's the same stock. So we try to do some things like that really give people the chance to say, here's how the time value of money shows up in Terracon stock for me in my job, my career, my salary, whatever that looks like. So that's one of the things that we do with that matters. But I do think one other comment on the generational piece, I had this comment from 6 years ago. We were doing our strategic planning process, and we had some emerging leaders in there. We were talking about employee ownership and what does that mean to these younger employees. And one of them said, well, the only difference between how you think about it and how I think about it, or people older than you think about it, is I want to know I want to stay before I know I want to buy. So it goes right back to that. Is this a culture where I think I can flourish, where I can make a difference, where I can have a great career? And if the answer to those questions is yes, I want in. That's sort of the mentality of that generation from our experience. And I'm really happy to have them as part of what we're doing.
Yeah, that's a great saying. We might have to make that a slogan for the industry. Thanks, Gail. Daphne, I think we got a really good question that you want to pose to the audience.
I was gonna pose this one question that's really nuts and bolts for Jay and Bob, and it's about when in the due diligence process did you notify staff? Did you notify first your up and comers, your leaders? How did that play out as you were having the discussion about moving to private equity, and where did you engage your team?
Jay, you mind if I go first on this one?
No, go for it.
Yeah. That was something that was extremely well thought out. Right or wrong, we didn't want the word to get out. So through the entire process of due diligence, we kept it the very minimum number of people to be involved inside the firm. And it essentially was just the board of directors and head of HR, head of IT, and obviously those pieces need to be involved at just the director's level. And it was very tightly held. Nobody else knew about that as we moved through it. As we started to get closer, we called it expanding the tent. And we started with the top leaders, and we had a well-crafted messaging. When I talked about being transparent, we had to explain the why. Remember, fiercely, privately, ownership held, just like you heard Gail and Steve. I mean, that's where we were. How do you explain that, right? And so we had to explain the why, the value proposition, and get that commitment from the next level of leadership. And so in those last 2 months, to slowly expand the tent to where you're within a week of the deal and you bring all the shareholders in and you tell them, again, well choreographed message, and you have breakout sessions to explain all the, we brought our private equity partner in to explain the process, answer all the questions. What does this mean for you? all the way through to the very end where we orchestrated telling our employees and the follow-up to that. So really strong, comprehensive communication strategy where only those that must know, and slowly expanding the 10 at the end. And it worked very well for us. Again, our retention's there, all ownerships rolled over. And I don't think very many people in the industry were aware of it. So I think we've kept it pretty quiet. So it's quite a, it's something you must do extremely well. And we were fortunate it worked out for us.
Yeah. Again, I'll remind you, we were a little bit different in the fact that we had attempted an internal transition. So our leadership team was aware. And when they actually, we got to the point of, they said that this was not going to be for them, they knew we were going to market. As part of the due diligence, all of that leadership team was brought into the tent, as Bob said. They were interviewed because, listen, a private equity is making investment in not only your clients, but also your people. The last thing they want to do is to have mass exodus, lose clients and things along those lines. So to some extent, you really have to control the messaging. It's unfortunate you can't open it up to the entire firm, until typically deals are done and consummated and that type of thing. So, but it went to the leadership team level within our firm, but they had already been very part of the process as we've been looking at transition.
Thanks. All right. Thank you, Jay. I've got a question from someone in the audience. It's a really good one. And it kind of hits the ownership models and also just what's going on in the world of engineering. And it relates to technology, AI, and disrupting the business and looking at the business like radically different, perhaps, than we historically have with what I would call incremental change over the last, 20, 30 years. There's a perception, Bob and Jay, that private equity comes in and wants to disrupt the business more than Gail and Steve do. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Have you experienced any, hey, let's challenge you guys to look at moving more to AI, moving more to outsourced services, moving more to new ways to deliver the product than you would ordinarily be pushing your business anyway? Start with you, Bob, and we'll get everyone's perspective, because this kind of ties into everything that's happening change-wise in the industry.
This is a really important question. At Gannett Fleming, we have a very, very strong culture in innovation, and we invest a lot in that. We invest a lot of short-term things that are going to make us around for the next 200 years in our strategic action plan. And it took us 20 years to build this culture of innovation. And we have a whole process that we go through to drive that. This is something I was extremely concerned about. This is a passion of mine, innovation. This year, AI was the top of the bill, and we built a complete organizational structure around the development of AI within our firm. How to get it into the hands, how you can coordinate it, how do you make it transformational? We had budgets for that, and I came at them strong, and they did. You could see the brakes were like, whoa, what do you want to do? So it's the opposite of what you said, Kevin. I'm driving it harder than they were when they saw the investment that we wanted to make, and we sat down, had a conversation with them. They completely aligned and approved our approach and the funding that we wanted to do for that. And so it was the reverse of what you said. I was pushing more than they were, but it gets back to for anybody that's going to contemplate private equity, you really have to have a match in values and culture about how you want to approach things. And in this particular case, we have somebody who believes in our approach on business, and we're able to do what we want to do.
Great. I'm going to switch it up and go to Steve next, so we don't do the PEPE routines. Steve, you guys are very innovative. Do you feel like you hold back on anything because of being an employee-owned firm?
Steve, you're on mute.
Muted, Steve.
Forgot I had taken a sip of water. Yeah, if we think it's the right thing to do, we'll invest the money. And I think the paradigm here is really interesting. The perception that, hey, you might not do it. I actually think there's more of a risk from a PE perspective, because we play the long view, right? I mean, we have a long game. If we think this is in the best interest, we're not worried about our exit in 3 or 5 years. I mean, in addition to our normal spend, we're investing $50 million in technology. Fine, we'll recoup that. I don't know if we'll recoup it in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, but it's good for our business. We're going to plow that money into it. We talk with our leaders. We decide, is that good for our business? That's that different calculus if you've got a PE partner, and the question is, can I get the return on this in 3 years or 5 years? What's my exit? And so I want to flip that narrative in the kind of spirit of the fair and balanced. But I'll go back to something we all agree on. You got to make a lot of money, right? So start with make a lot of money, right? And then deploy it wisely. And we feel really comfortable that we can do that. But we don't ask the question, what's the horizon on this? Is this going to help us grow our business? And then we build around that. And so we're able to make big investments. And yeah, that's a place we're spending, like everybody else, I'd just be repeating myself, a lot of resources, a lot of outside expertise. And last thing, if I can, sort of wearing my ACEC Research Institute hat, this is a place we're spending a ton of time on behalf of the industry. So another thing I think we'll all agree on, we're trying to push out content from the Institute that will be beneficial, agnostic of what your ownership is, that's just good for our industry. So, be looking for the Institute to be pushing out content on, how AI is going to affect us and the things that we can all be doing that's good for our industry.
Great, Steve. Thank you so much. Jay, back to that question. Is PE nervous about the change in the industry, pushing it? Where does your firm sit on this issue?
So I'm not an expert by any means, but I do hear from a number of private equity firms that have invested in engineering. I may blow the misnomer here, but PE firms, to be honest with you, are looking for stability. They're not looking to just go all in on the latest technologies and think that they're going to blow it away on one particular thing. That's a big part of why our industry is so attractive to private equity, is the stability and the growth. And that's what they look for in their portfolios, pure and simple. They don't want these firms that are going to just explode and then level off and not be there. We've shot ourselves in the foot. That's why we're so attracted to private equity. And that's why they're coming into our field like you wouldn't believe. And I think AI is along those same lines. They want us to be involved. They don't necessarily need us to be cutting edge, but we don't need to be on the lagging side of this and be at least where our competitors are, and providing good services and things like that to our clients. That's been my experience.
Gail, before I get your thoughts, just want to give the panel a heads up. We're going to be asking you for one big thought to include the panel. And I think what you're saying, Jay, is explode but not implode. Should be a good thing. Gail, where do you sit on this whole change, and how does it impact your ownership model, impact your decision making, if at all?
Yeah, I'm going to be agnostic on the ownership model on this, and I think that if you are not nervous, paranoid, and excited in equal measure about what technology is going to do to our industry in the next 10 years, you're not awake. Because we have to be, to quote a very good friend of mine, we need to Uber ourselves before we get Kodak'd. And if we think that our competitors and are the people sitting on this call, we're wrong. It's Google. It's the data companies who are saying, we've got all your data already. All we need you is to stamp this seal and we're good. That is a threat that we're not talking about. So I don't think I'm ownership agnostic on this. I think we collectively need to be picking our heads up, looking around and saying, wait a minute, the way we did it 50 years ago is not the way we can do it today. And it is a daily struggle on that, because right now we're so busy trying to get it done the way we needed to do it today. So that's the job of leadership, not and ownership plays a part of that. But I will even go so far as my final thought for us as the panel is, your leadership transition and your ownership transition can be separate things, but the more tightly they are wound together, the fewer options you have if you are not starting now to think about the track of each of those things, because it's when they are 1-to-1 ratio and it's late in the game, you have fewer options to consider as an owner of a company. And if you want to be able to evaluate what is best for the future of your firm, you really need to think about those things separately and how they are related, and start early and work it often. So.
Great, Gail, thanks so much. Offered up to the panelists, who wants to go next on your last sort of sage advice for the audience, which you've had a lot of it, and we're looking forward to one more thought.
I'll be happy to go next. Again, I don't think private equity is ever going to be the predominant ownership model in our industry. I just don't think. I do think it will continue to grow. And I think it's because we are so attractive as an industry. Pure and simple. I hear that over and over again from private equity. It's very stable, very profitable, and they're going to continue to do that. Speaking to the owners who are on the call, day one, you open your firm. Day two, you need to start the leadership and ownership transition. It is never, ever too early to start having the conversations. What does that look like? You're going to decide what is best when it comes down to it. You know your owners, you know your leaders, and you're going to make that right decision. There's a lot of options out there, and there's a lot of great firms, both privately held as well as held by private equity.
Thank you, Jay. Steve, do you want to go next? We'll have Bob wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. My advice isn't terribly different than Jay's. Is start thinking about all of this early, right? In the evolution of your firm, right? It's, PE is going to get real excited when they see you're not growing and you don't have a good ownership transition plan. And so if you have a passion to be private, and I hope there's people out there that do, start thinking about that 10 years before you think you need to think about it. And then the last pitch is there are, PE is, we're here to help, and they're helping a lot of firms figure this out. But there are other paths, right? And I think I speak for Gail and myself, like we want to help other firms that have a more from an altruistic, we think it's good for our industry. Pick our brains, talk to other leaders in the industry on how did you remain private? What are the things that you think we should be doing? There are people that want to help. There are, again, in the spirit of fair and balance, there's other paths. For some, PE may be a very good path. And I hope for many, remaining private and getting some advice from people smarter than me, like Gail, would be really helpful for you in your journey to remain private.
Thanks, Steve. Bob?
My final comments would be, we're in an unprecedented area of change going on right now, with climate change and AI and robotics, and I believe it's going to drive our firms to look a little different than we are today, and we're going to do business a little bit different than we did today. My fellow panelists all were very articulate in making sure you understand leadership and ownership transition. That's another key to this. So while we're evolving and dealing with all these forces of change, you have ownership transition that's going along with it, and you got to get way out in front of this. I mean, you don't want to wake up and say, oh, next year we got a problem. The sooner you can understand what's going to happen, and what are you going to have to do to financially meet those needs, right? And how are you going to get there? The sooner you know that, the better. And my final comment would be, anybody that's contemplating private equity, we weren't looking for it. It just happened to us. I interviewed 40 private equity firms, family office, public company, the whole 9 yards. Honestly, they're all the same. They want to make investments and make money. Some have a more stable, and you heard Jay, some of them are more interested in stability and more longer term, a little bit. I'm telling you, a little bit. There isn't that big a difference between them all, in my opinion. What matters is, do they understand your value system? Do they understand your culture? Because you can't mess with that. And they're all, and you'll know after the first meeting whether it's there or it's not. They're all different. All of them are different. And when you can find a couple that really align, and you make sure that's the number one thing you look at, values and culture.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to turn over to Daphne, but I wanted to just address a quick question from somebody in the audience, which was, 4 terrific leaders, very articulate, very insightful. We thank you so much. And all 4 of you and your firms are quite involved in the industry and ACEC and other industry associations. So again, thanks for giving back to the industry, all of you. You've been a terrific panel. Daphne, your wrap-up thoughts.
Thanks, Kevin. Yes, I echo your appreciation for these 4 leaders as well. Steve, Jay, Bob, Gail, thank you so much for sharing your insights, being candid and passionate about this topic. Thank you to our donors who make what we do at the Institute possible. You'll see them here on the screen. If you're not on the screen, I invite you to reach out and join us. Please let us know, and we'd be happy to share with you how it all works. We will be sending you an evaluation this afternoon. Please share your thoughts with us. It only makes us better. And with that, Kevin, thank you for keeping us on track and navigating this topic, which is a tough one. But I think you did a great job of keeping it balanced for us. And I hope everyone has a safe and happy holiday and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.